Hey everybody, Doug here, one of the hosts, producers, and creators of the Genre of Your Life podcast, bringing you a review roundup bonus episode this week. Happy August to you all. Hope you had a great July. Hope you're staying cool out there. Wishing you all a great month ahead. On this week's bonus episode, I'll be reviewing Netflix's new movie, They Cloned Tyrone, as well as my quick thoughts and reaction to season 3, The Righteous Gemstones, one of my favorite shows starring Danny McBride, which is on HBO, streaming on Max. I'm a big Danny McBride fan. Shows like Eastbound and Down, Vice Principals are one of my favorite shows of all time. So I'm very excited to review both these projects for you. As always, guys, you can find the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform of choice. We'll also have a full audio version of the show on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Midway Avenue Productions. While you're there, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Hit that follow, subscribe button. Leave a review, leave a rating. Helps us out so much. As always, guys, thank you so much for your support. And if you're going to the Stray screen that we were kind of sponsoring this summer, say hi to Nick and I. We'll be at the next screening, which is, I believe, August 9th in Scottsdale at Camel View. So if you're in the Phoenix area, you're able to go on these screenings. Say hello to us. We'll be there next Wednesday. Looking forward to seeing that movie. Looking forward to seeing you guys there. So I hope you enjoy. All right, let's get into it, shall we? So I want people to go on this movie as blind as they can because I try to avoid trailers sometimes as well. But I knew this one had Jamie Foxx, John Boyega, Tiana Paris, who are three phenomenal actors. Three of my favorite working actors today, if you ask me. Like you mentioned, They Cloned Tyrone is basically about set in modern day, I would say, and it's basically these three characters find themselves in a very strange and very eerie situation of what's real and what's not real, basically. And something seems kind of fishy. Is the government involved? Who's involved? What's going on in the neighborhood? Again, that's all I'm going to say because, I want to get as spoiler-free as possible. But yeah, let's get into it, shall we? So, starting off with the pros, I think John Boyega is a phenomenal actor. I think I've been a fan of him. And me and Joel have actually been fans of him since we saw him in Attack the Block in 2011. We're like, who is this kid? This kid has charisma. And sure enough, he was casted in the reboots of Star Wars. I do think his performance was great in all three movies, but I think they did his character very dirty in the last two movies. But he was phenomenal in Force Awakens, which is one of my favorite Star Wars movies of all time. John Boyega has so much charisma, man. He has a very charm to him, and I love seeing, he has a lot of range too as an actor, which is, again, stuff like Detroit, Attack the Block, Star Wars, list goes on and on. He really is a phenomenal actor. And it's really impressive to see how he loses really thick British accent. He's gone different Americanized accents, and it's very, very impressive. But yeah, John Boyega to me really is someone to look out for as a star, if you ask me. And Jamie Foxx to me is one of my heroes. He's one of my idols since I was a kid. His sister had Down syndrome, as my brother has Down syndrome. I idolize this guy. I think he's one of the most talented people in the world. He can do it all. He can sing, he can rap, he can act, he can do comedy, he can dance. He really is so charismatic, and he's just really just a charming dude. So he's one of my heroes, one of my idols. And, again, seeing him, how he interacted with Special Olympics or Best Buddies, that was very inspiring to me as a sibling with Down syndrome, that has Down syndrome. It was just really like, wow, like he's just like me for real. And I was really sad when I found out that his sister passed away because he really was involved with the community. He's very spark of life. And I'm really glad he's doing better. He had a bit of a health scare for the past couple of months. So I'm really glad to see him back and running again. He's one of the most good dudes, I feel like, in the world, especially in Hollywood. So much love to Jamie Foxx and Tiana Paris too. I first saw her in Chirac. I'll be frank. Me and Joel, one of the few movies that we walked out of because we were like, yeah, this depicts Chicago not in the best light. I was still living in Chicago at the time, and it didn't depict Chicago in the best light. Personally, I know Chance the Rapper kind of spoke about it. A lot of people were like, this isn't Chicago. Spike Lee, who I do think is a phenomenal filmmaker, just kind of like I don't know, he wasn't telling the right story about Chicago, and then he came from Chicago too, so it's kind of like, it's not gonna be your story to tell. But I thought she was good in it, despite me walking out of the movie. I still finished it eventually, maybe a few years later, and I thought she was really good in it. I think I first saw her more as a star was in a WandaVision. I'm like, oh, she has a lot of chops as well, and I think in this movie too, she's phenomenal in this because she has a different kind of like element to a different layer to her character out of all three of them, which is very fun to watch. But yeah, so basically, John Boyega plays a drug dealer. Jamie Foxx plays a pimp, and Tiana Paris plays a prostitute, and it's basically them kind of like noticing something in the neighborhood, in their town, like something's kind of up. What's going on here? And strange things happen left and right. It's a very kind of like rated R take on X-Files with a splash of Stranger Things. This is how I called it personally, all three of them. I think this is like Sorry to Bother You, Oblivion, movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise, and Stranger Things with the touch of the show Atlanta, Donald Glover's show Atlanta, one of my favorite shows of all time. Yeah, so Oblivion, Sorry to Bother You, Stranger Things, and A Touch of Atlanta. It's the best way I can probably pitch this movie, but it's it's really intriguing, like how they kind of like kept things certain secret and a lot of twists and turns I want to give away, but it's a really movie you gotta watch and like, oh, wait a second, I can't wait to watch it again because I want to see more things I missed out on the first watch. Jamie Foxx, again, it's the dialogue to me is very, very clever. It's very funny. It's a very sci-fi comedy, very eerie kind of take on the genre itself, and it's like how these different genres kind of work together is very, very done well. The dialogue's hilarious, if you ask me. I love like they do a good job of like referencing random movie quotes, like stuff you haven't heard of in years, like, oh, I forgot about that movie, no way, or certain actors you haven't heard from in a while, and like funny like Denzel quotes here and there, and I was like, oh, this is hilarious, and I do love when movies kind of reference other movies, and it's very kind of like, oh, these were written by kind of film fans, like film nerds, because you can tell like, oh, they're a fan of movie making, filmmaking, different genres. I do feel like this also was a movie, the love letter to Spike Lee a little bit. I think Spike Lee has really has an impact on a lot of filmmaking, especially in black cinema. But I think Spike Lee really is as a filmmaker that really kind of just like broke the ground on a lot of things, a lot of storytelling. And I think this also was kind of a love letter to him and what he brought to the table as a filmmaker, a tour as they say. And also it's really funny again if you listen to dialogue very like with such distinct, you'll catch up on a lot of like certain references. I was like, huh, no way. There's a Dexter Laboratory show reference. I'm like, that's hilarious. Because again, it's these very kind of like out there, deep cut references. But if you get them, they're very rewarding for you as a viewer, if you ask me. Love, again, I said the mystery genre and the sci-fi really work together very well. You know, I'm a big fan of like genre bending, genre kind of like hybrid type of movie storytelling because it's very fresh, it's very unique, it's very kind of like, oh, this is new, I like this. You know, we live in an era of just everything's a remake, a reboot, a sequel, whatever. So I do love seeing stuff A that's original, but B that it can bend, it can merge genres very well together. Again, I love Jamie Foxx. Is very kind of, again, as I said, he's one of my idols. It's just very fun to see him in a role, kind of like letting loose, and his pimp voice is very funny too, because it's like he seems welcoming, but is he threatening? I don't know. It's very funny, but really, all three of them have fantastic chemistry. Both Tiana, John Boyega, and Jamie Foxx really have just like phenomenal chemistry, and it shows in the movie too. You know, you'll see in movies a lot too of like, yeah, they don't even work that well together. I mean, it's fine. Like they seem kind of believable. They have great chemistry where like it brings you in for the moment they're all introduced together on the screen. I'm like, okay, I'm on board. Let's go for it. And I do think that the entire movie, that chemistry is very strong throughout the entire film. Even at the end, you're just like, yep, that worked. And I've been seeing a lot of stuff recently this summer with stuff like Indiana Jones or stuff like Transformers or even The Flash too. That chemistry to me is more of like it didn't really work for me. Like example was Indiana Jones this past summer with him and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, both great performances from both of them. I still feel the chemistry or like the interaction between Harrison Ford and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and I was like, I wish it could have been stronger or could have been written better. But with this truly felt like okay, the chemistry through all three of them is very strong. It's very gold. It's like this is why it works. Again, original. We live in an era of summer of remakes and reboots and sequels and big stuff like that. To me, this was, again, I wish this movie was in theaters. I think this would have crushed in theaters if you ask me, because I think the movie theaters definitely need an original voice, an original story, with three great actors. But it would have came out the same weekend as Barbie and Oppenheimer, which would not probably been good for the film or the actors. So I get why you wanted to on streaming. I get it, but if they were able to hold it a little bit or a different time, or at least a little bit earlier, I think it would have crushed in theaters personally, because there's so much to like this movie. You're just like, this would have been a great movie to see with a crowd and an audience. So I don't know. That's just me personally as a big, pro theatrical person. There's a lot into this. I was like, man, this would have been cool to see on a big, big screen. But I rest my case. The costume and production design to me is great in this, because it really, again, I think it's all unique and it's so different. You're like, huh, I haven't seen this before in a movie, or I haven't seen it in a long time. Everyone has their own distinction as a character. John Boyega does, Tiana Paris does, as well as Jamie Foxx. And I'm like, huh, they really crafted their wardrobe really well to each of their characters. and it's not like too flashy. It's subtle, but has some kind of like flashy and kind of like slickness and coolness to it, which I really liked about it as well. And the production design I thought was really fascinating. Again, without giving much away, but like when they certain kind of reveal certain things, I was like, oh, this is really cool how they designed this or set this up, because it kind of made me feel like this certain movie or this movie. I'm like, oh, again, it could be a callback to those movies as well, but it's really cool how they kind of crafted this some of these production sets and some of the set design. At times too, it kind of felt like a John Carpenter movie at times. It really kind of felt like early John Carpenter, like Escape from New York kind of vibe. You're like, oh, this is cool, and it could be paying homage to it, but that's the vibe I was getting really well. Like, oh, this is love letter to a lot of other movies, like I said, Spike Lee, but for sure getting a John Carpenter vibe as well as a Stranger Things kind of vibe. Which again, I like this a lot. Again, when you blend them right, when you blend genres, you kind of like take inspiration from other filmmakers and you work them well. That's awesome, if you ask me. I love that. I want to give a shout out to the writing, directing too. I love seeing new talent, young filmmakers getting their chance, whether it's a movie like this, which is on Netflix, or in the big screen. To me, it's refreshing to see young talent really get their shine. And I want to shout out the director, Jewel Taylor, who I think has a great career ahead of him. He co-wrote Creed 2, which is one of my favorite movies in the Rocky and Creed franchise. He did write Space Jam 2, which I'm not the biggest fan of. There's some moments I thought was okay. I don't think it was as bad as people gave it, but it's no original Space Jam if you ask me. And I think he also wrote some like additional work for stuff like Transformers. I believe the movie Missing, which I highly recommend. It's on Netflix. Jewel Taylor, to me, again, young talent, young filmmaker, really knew how to handle all these different genres into one movie, and know how to get great performances out of John Boyega, Jamie Foxx, Keanu Paris. And to me, it shows like, hey, this guy really has a great career ahead of him, because he was able to do all this together. This is his first movie he ever directed too. He wrote a lot of stuff before. This is the directorial debut, and I love watching kind of like first-time directors kind of find their genre or find their groove. Whether it was Jordan Peele in Get Out, whether it was John Krasinski in Quiet Place, Greta Gerwig in Lady Bird. I love seeing young filmmakers and their first movie, because it feels like, okay, this is my starting point. Where do I go from here? Like Jordan Peele did with Get Out, Us, and Nope. Greta Gerwig did with Lady Bird, Little Women, and now Barbie. It's, to me, I just really love seeing directors see where they start from their first movie and evolve. And I'm very curious to see what he does next as a filmmaker and as a writer, because again, I think he has a lot of good things in store for us, I think, as a filmmaker. So I think his direction was superb. It was very tight, and I think his writing with his writing partner Tony Redemeyer, they've worked together before, I think, on stuff like Space Jam and also Missing and Transformers as well. I think Searching as well they worked on together. You can tell they work really well together as writers. I think, as a writer myself, I write stuff all the time with Joel or Moses or Nick, some other friends too. If you have a bond with someone as a writer, it's a bond for life. And if you can write well with that certain person, it shows up how creative you can be together and how more creative you can be when you have a great writing partner. Whether it's a show, whether it's a movie, whether it's a podcast, whether it's audiobook, whatever, or book itself, it shows that you have a good collaboration with this person and you can do a lot of good things with them, because a lot of people do write solo, and that's totally fine. A lot of filmmakers do. But there's a lot of beauty in the craft to writing things together with a co-writer or a team of co-writers. I think having a partner or two is very kind of like more tighter. But when you do have that kind of like writing partner, you're kind of like set for life, if you ask me. Like Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, who did the Cornetto trilogy, World's End, Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead. It shows that you can work well with someone, and you can really bring great ideas to both of each other. Like, hey, that was the Nick all the time. Hey, is this idea pretty cool? Nah, that's right. How about this? Oh, cool. You bring good out of each other, which is very important in the writing collaborative process, because each of you bring something different to the table. And very similar things as well. But you can like collaborate on that, and also kind of just like, oh, I like this more, I like this better. Let's fix this. It's a very collaborative effort. I do think him and these two writers worked phenomenal together, if you ask me. So we have shout out to them as well. But yeah, I think this movie really is like something special. It's really cool to see certain actors pop up too, and again, the genre bending and the acting, to me, is really the storytelling, or to me, are the big strong suits of this movie, because I'm like, wow, these all work together so well on the same level. To not one work better than the other, I think they all worked equally as good. But I go with some cons as always. The cons I will say though, we live in this kind of era now too of more people want to shoot on film or use film to like a filter. Like, again, you see stuff like Oppenheimer, that Chris Nolan shot that movie on film, and things like Stranger Things, you kind of try to use film, certain like not filters or different lenses, and it looks very filterized. I do think that this movie, they use too much grain, and I'm pretty sure it's shot on digital, and you can tell like they put like a film filter over the movie, and the first hour I would say, oh, this is too much. Like, you should dial it back a little bit or not use it at all. But they're trying to like have a message of like, oh, look at this, it's artsy in film. I get it, it is really cool, but it kind of takes away from the movie itself and the quality a little bit. Because I'm like, I can't really see too much in the movie, and it was too grainy at times. I'm like, what's that again? Like, what is this? And it takes away from the movie itself. So I was like, yeah, you can use it, but don't overdo it, if you ask me. Again, that's just me personally. I'm like, it's cool, but when you overuse it, it kind of takes away from the purpose of using it and the movie itself. Sound mixing too. I think there's times where they're talking and certain sounds the background sound are louder than the dialogue. I'd either raise my volume or have captions on, because I was like, what are they saying? Or rewind it, whatever. I was like, oh, okay. So I think it's a lot more too in movies the past year or so, is that the sound mixing has to like either have to balance out each other really well, or one can be louder than the other. Because I saw something recently too, I think it was Ninja Turtles or something, where it was like the sound and dialogue were not on the same level. It was like, oof, this is not good. And sometimes a podcast, I'm learning more about this every episode we do, is that, hey, we gotta make sure the sound not like one isn't too louder than the other. We make sure on the same level. But I'm seeing a lot more in big pictures of big movies of like, yeah, the sound and dialogue are not mixing well. So there are times on this movie where I'm like, oh, the sound mixing kind of bothering me. Gonna fix the sound or enhance the dialogue a bit more, or because I can't hear what they're saying. I do think there's something that I was like, okay, I kind of grew to it, but it's a con that I think other people are noticing too, but I have too much of an issue with. It's not really too much spoiler, but they don't really tell you what year or what town they're in. They mention other towns, like actual towns in the States, but they don't really mention like what year it is, because you'll see like people using flip phones, people using an iPhone at one point. And I was like, oh, certain technologies present. You're like, oh, okay. So I guess maybe it's I read from the director that he wanted to like have the audience like, hey, you decide where this is, where this takes place, what year it takes place. So I'm like, huh, interesting. I was kind of putting in my head, I was like, when does this take place? I mean, they're showing certain things and they mention certain movies, and I was like, I guess, but that to me at first I was kind of like, I would make more clear explanation of where and when this is. But after reading the article with the director, I was like, I guess I could like make your own preference. But I think it could have been cool just to have some kind of like slight like, hey, it takes place, this is the year, blah blah blah. So, but that's, again, it's a little nitpicking personally, but you know, again, as much as I love John Boyega, he has this really great grill in this movie. But sometimes when he's talking with the grill, he's kind of like mumbling his words, or kind of like just not like enunciating. And I think the grill's kind of like blocking him from like saying his dialogue. But it's only in certain scenes. In other scenes, you can understand him. But when the grill's kind of like really present, he's kind of muttering his words, and I'm like, maybe it's too tight. Maybe it wasn't adjusted correctly. But I did notice that a lot. A few times I was like, ooh, I can't hear what he's saying. Captions, or raise the volume. But I do think at one time he hasn't even said inaudible dialogue. So I was like, uh-oh. So maybe that to me, I was kind of like, fix the grill a little bit. It looks really cool if it's his character, but I can't hear what he's saying. I was like, oh, okay. It's hard to hear dialogue. I think my big con too was that the theatrical, this would have been a great movie in theatrical. I do think this movie would have killed theatrically. I think this was a Netflix movie from the beginning, and I get that. But I think this movie would have been really important to see this movie in theaters with a great cast and rising stars in Tiana Paris and John Boyega and the legend as Jamie Foxx is. I think this would have brought in a lot of audiences. And personally, I do think we gotta support more original movies like this, that we can get theatrical release stuff like this. Because Netflix ain't doing it. Netflix is like, nope, we tried, and they only give their movies a chance in theaters, if you ask me. So it would have been cool to see this in theaters. The twist, without giving much away, the twist to me, I was like, okay, I got on board with it, but yeah, it's questionable. Where things are kind of like it's a little too. That's a little too easy. Like it's a little too like okay, that's a little too like too not attainable, but it's like okay, that's a little too close to too easy to like understand. All right, but like it's a plot hole that I was like seen before in the movies. I'm like it's a little too like convenient. That's the word. It's a little too convenient. I was like okay, but it doesn't bother me too much as I'm thinking about the movie, but I still thought like, wait, that was just too easy for that thing to happen. I'm like, this could have been different, or like, but I could be nitpicking a little bit, but it did bother me at the end where I was like, it was good. The twist was interesting. I did like the twist, but the way they handled the twist after, I was like, oh, okay, I guess whatever. But I'll tell you what, when the movie ends, there's another twist, and I say, "Oh man!" It just ends. You're just like, "Oh man, that's something else." I'm more intrigued now. Will they do a sequel? Maybe, but it's really how they end this movie on a twist. It's like I like that. It's a very clever way they ended that. So I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. It's one of my favorite movies of the year so far, if you ask me. Again, original filmmaking is very important for us to support and to see, either to watch on Netflix or streaming, whatever. And also, I do love giving new talent, John Boyega, Tana Paris, and Jewel Taylor and his co-writer Tony. Really, again, props for creating an original movie in the summer, but having some great performances, mixing the genres really well. Great soundtrack, a great score too. It was very kind of funky, very groovy. And again, the humor to me worked a lot. I was laughing my ass off on a lot of stuff. I was like, this is hilarious. So them able to handle comedy, sci-fi, mystery, thriller, all this together, I was like, man, this is really, really cool. And it had a little bit of a throwback to, I think to me, it was a little bit of Attack the Block Weekend, which is John Boyega's kind of first big role as an actor. So I'll kind of call back to that as well. But really, this movie is very, very, very special, if you ask me. So definitely recommend seeing this on Netflix right now. It's available to stream. Yeah, 9 out of 10. One of my top 10 of the year so far. I can't wait to be able to watch this movie because it's very, very special and great performances throughout. All right. So, as I said too, in the episode, Dan McBride to me is one of my favorite actors. I think, yes, he plays a schmuck and a bit of a unlikable jerk in most of his stuff, but I think with his shows, Eastbound, Vice Principals, and Gemstones, he brings these kind of goofy concepts, but like you're really intrigued by all three of them. Like, okay, a baseball player that that he was a has-been, but once it kind of road to redemption again, or two vice principals who will hate each other are fighting for the same job. They form an alliance in Vice Principals. Or in Gemstones, family by televangelists who are just really privileged and very kind of just wealthy, kind of like have crazy adventures. Like it's really kind of weird how he has these certain like ideas, but they work so well in each of his films, each of his series. And I think he's also trying to expand his stuff with his co-writer and co-partner David Gordon Green, who they did they did all three Halloweens together. And I love the first Halloween they did together in 2018. The movie's awesome. I love that movie. Special place in my heart. It's very special. Sequels, kills, and ends, it was fine. I still enjoy them for what they were. I know they're kind of like divided and very kind of divisive between fans, whatever, but I think they were terrible. I still had fun with them personally. And now I think the writing and producing, I think David Gordon Green's directing the new Exorcist, was really hyped for because it's the same guys, same team again. So I hope they have a lot of like luck with this franchise as well. But again, big Dan McBride fan all the way from The Foot Fist Away to Pineapple Express. This is the end. Big fan of him. So Again, Vice Principals is my favorite show of all three of them, between Vice Principals, Gemstones, and Eastbound and Down. Gemstones, I think the first two seasons to me are perfection. I think they're hilarious. They have a lot of good emotion to it. They have a lot of heartfelt moments for this raunchy TV televangelist story. But the performances from everyone, from Adam Devine, Dan McBride, John Goodman. I'm blanking on his sister's name, who plays his sister. Everyone really kind of brings something special, and it's a very kind of like raunchy but heartfelt series. And again, even in Vice Principals too, there's a lot of raunchiness, a lot of kind of like crude and rude humor. Edie Patterson plays his sister, Judy Gemstone. So again, Edie Patterson as well. It's every show he does, he brings emotion within the crude and raunchiness of it all, and it really works, if you ask me. Season 3, though, I thought was not different, but it was different. It was definitely different to its own way, where I think the first two seasons were stronger because they established both season 1 and season 2, like giving spoilers away. The first two seasons kind of established what the season's going to be right away. I'm like, oh, I like that. Season 3, I think, kind of had a problem with like saying what it was going to be, and then established like the story arc maybe 2 or 3 in, and I was like, okay, I guess this is where it's going. I enjoyed the season for sure, but I thought the first two seasons I enjoyed them more. I kind of felt more like, ooh, I felt more interested in the stories. Where in this one, I was like, okay, yeah, like there's some like backstory to the gemstones and the family members get reintroduced, whatever. I'm like, okay, that's a story, but the way the other two seasons had their story arc, I was like, yeah, I'm way more intrigued. I was way more intrigued with those two storylines and how they progressed than this one. Steve Zahn is kind of like the quote unquote antagonist of this season. I'm a big Steve Zahn fan from That Thing You Do all the way from even the Wimpy Kid movies. Saving Silverman, one of my favorite movies too. It's really again I think he's a great actor, but he was great in The White Lotus as well, season one. But to me, I liked him, but he didn't really add anything to this season or to the series. Where in the last two seasons, I was like, yeah, I felt more interested in the quote unquote antagonist of those seasons more than this one. I was like, yeah, I guess, but there are some really funny moments. I mean, laughing out loud. A lot more development with BJ's character, stuff with Judy, and as well as development in both Kelvin and Keith's storyline, as well as Jesse and Eli's storyline. They do dive in a lot of their storylines and a lot of baby Billy, as well as his wife, and really they do a good job of really kind of like Amy Lee. They do a good job of kind of developing their kind of storylines a little bit more, but it just kind of feels a little flat at times. Kind of feels like they're kind of like dragging it out a little bit to the very end of the season. And I was surprised too they dropped the last two seasons of the last two episodes of the season together last Sunday. I was like, they should do week release. So I'm like, maybe they're trying to get it out. Like, hey, make it out because of the strike, or hey, we're done with the season, moving on to the next one because it was renewed for season 4. Again, overall a great season. If you're a fan, again, basically Gemstones is about Telvange's family again, who was wealthy and a lot of shenanigans going on. You're powerful. You create a lot of enemies, and I highly recommend the show for sure. But definitely watch Vice Principals as well as Eastbound and Down, because all three of them have his kind of damaged bride, David Gordon Green, Jody Hill, which is his partners. Their kind of stamp on each series. So for sure, watch the show. It's hilarious. It's a lot of funny, great acting, great character relationships, great humor, a lot of dark moments, violent at times for sure, very violent. Even Vice Principals are pretty violent as well as Eastbound and Down. But it showed that I highly recommend. I think Danny McBride is very kind of like clever. I think he's a great writer. I think he directs and writes most of the shows with his partners at his production company, David Gordon Green and Jody Hill. So for sure, watch this show. But yeah, I was kind of disappointed as a fan. Again, it was a good season, but I kind of wish they did more. But I am looking forward to season 4, which is coming out. Who knows when? Maybe when the strike's over. But yeah, definitely a big fan of Danny McBride. So I recommend both. They Cloned Tyrone and Righteous Gemstones. Both shows I think everyone would enjoy it during the time when we're kind of running out of content to watch on streaming. Alrighty. And yeah, guys, it's August now. We've had a summer of ups and downs with movies and shows. I think, we got Strays coming out. Again, Strays coming out in a few weeks. We got Gran Turismo's coming out. That's about it. Blue Beetle, unfortunately, coming out. But I think I'm hearing things it's gonna be a big flop, unfortunately. Which again, I do like that actor a lot. And then it's nothing. It's gonna be, I think, Equalizer 3, which I'm hyped for. I love Denzel, I love Antoine Fuqua, I love that franchise. Coming out September 1st, but in the meantime, nothing come out really too much on theaters. But Barbie and Oppenheimer are killing it at the box office, which is really cool. Both made so much money in their opening weekends, and then their second weekends, not much big of a drop. So I think those two are going to hold out the box office for a while, if you ask me, because nothing crazy is coming out for a while. So support your local cinema, support your theaters. We need it right now. Go see Barbie again. Go see Oppenheimer again. I'm trying to go see Oppenheimer again back in the 143 IMAX out here in Phoenix, but it's like sold out for weeks. Like everyone tries to see the movie more and more. So it's really, really cool to see that, because it's impossible to get a ticket now because it's so like hot, so in demand. But with streaming too, I mean, what's coming out on streaming soon? I don't know actually. I've been following as much. I see something new, like I'll watch it, but that too, with both strikes going on, both strikes are going strong right now. They're trying to figure out a way to compromise with the studios. But yeah, so support your local cinema, guys. Support your local theater. Again, go see Barbie again. Go see Oppenheimer. Go see whatever. If it's indie again or whatever's playing right now, the theaters need it. I think it can be a kind of a snooze fest for us of the summer. But who knows? Maybe Gran Turismo was good. Hopefully Strays is good. I can't wait to see it next week at the screening. Again, love Will Ferrell, love Jimmy Fox. So hype for that. But okay, also go see Ninja Turtles. I saw this the weekend on screening. I'll have my full review on this full week's episode of Genre Review Life podcast with Joe and the boys, Nick and Moses. But very fun movie too. If you're a Ninja Turtle fan, you're gonna love this movie. But right now it's Ninja Turtles, Turismo, Blue Beetle, and Stray. So hopefully the box office can survive a bit more until we get into the fall season. But even then, with the delays going on, Dune might get pushed. I'm really excited about that. I can't wait for Dune Part 2. But who knows? So support your theaters, guys. Hope you have a great summer. Hope you're staying cool, like I said, and we will see you next time. Take care.